kind message to Milo Stewart. Advice from an older queer. Hey Milo, it's Prince of Queens. And while I've tweeted at you a few times and you basically just swore at me and didn't actually watch the video I felt you might benefit from checking out, I really don't take that personally. I'm sure a lot of people have been jerks to you, I've seen it, and truthfully, I am a 34-year-old homosexual man that came out when I was 14 in an inner city that went to a particularly rough school, so I have a bit of a thick skin. However, I saw your recent video on your smaller channel, and while I admire that you are finally starting to be a bit more honest with your real emotions, instead of putting on an act like you seem to on your main channel all the time, I am honestly rather worried about you, as I'm sure many people are saying, and I figured I could actually offer some really helpful advice as a queer elder. I imagine your immediate thought is to want to brush off my genuine, compassionate advice because I'm a cis gay white male or something, which many young, non-binary identified people do every time I offer such wisdom. But please trust me that I have spent the majority of my life identifying as queer, and as you can hear from my voice, in my soul, I definitely have a very strong feminine element. Perhaps if I were your age in the current year, I would toy with identifying as non-binary. I'm not really sure. You see, I know very well that there are plenty of complicated gender identities out there, and I don't think of things so strictly as a lot of the young binary-oriented queer people do. I feel this way because I have known several genderqueer people of all varieties personally throughout the years. One of my first friends that I knew from queer youth activism in the late 90s first initially identified as a quote-unquote boy dyke, and then as a trans male, without transitioning. He was, objectively, to be honest, quite a lot more masculine than you come across. But, he couldn't help that his entire life, and I don't mean that as an insult to you. I reconnected with him in my 20s, and he was going through a very angry period in his life. He no longer considered himself fully male, but considered himself some sort of androgynous type gender. He wanted his pronouns to be it. This was about 10 years ago, and we didn't have a lot of terminology back then, even amongst people who had been discussing queer theory since we were teenagers. When I asked him what it was all about, it largely sounded like he didn't want to go on hormones because of the health risks, specifically with the increased likelihood that he might eventually end up with cancer. There seemed to be more to the story, but he wasn't particularly keen on talking about it at the party where I saw him. A few years later, I saw him again, and he was very clearly on testosterone and had been for a while. And he had yet another name. I believe this was maybe the third or fourth name that I have known him by. Finally, despite the fact that he put it off as long as possible, he ended up on hormones because it was the best choice for his mental health. He said he identifies as a he now, and he seemed more comfortable in his own skin than I have ever noticed him in the past. You see, as somebody who knew him quite well as a very young person, I could always see the male in him, and I could always sense that he was uncomfortable appearing as a woman to a lot of people. However, I'm not positive I see that in you. And it would sadly seem that my opinion is the majority. Again, I don't mean this as an insult. I have just a quick question. Do you know how hard it will be to find a practitioner that will diagnose you as non-binary and will still be willing to provide you with HRT or any sort of surgeries? The suicide rates get much higher after people go on hormones, especially for non-binary people, and so most doctors are not going to give you hormones at all, even if you think you want them. You would have to have like full-blown gender dysphoria, which we are pretty certain that you don't, because you were talking about the fact that you had to rediscover your gender dysphoria during research or whatever because you hadn't researched it in 4 years. That's a really long time to not think about your gender dysphoria very much. I was once talking to a non-binary identifying person online that said they wanted a full hysterectomy when they could afford it. Seriously, they want their uterus and ovaries out of their body. Not only is that extremely expensive, but it is very dangerous. My sister was a medical professional for several years, and she said that about 1 in 100 people die from the anesthesia alone that is required for such a major surgery. really think about this stuff. I recall having an awkward conversation with a genderqueer person last decade. The person was assigned female at birth but identified as a man but had done nothing to transition. We ended up having a tense moment when I told them that there's some women that say that they are trans men that do nothing to transition that I simply don't believe are really men. Sure, I think that there are people assigned female at birth that I can see as male without transitioning necessarily, as my other friend that I talked about earlier has shown me, but there's a large pool of people that just don't seem male to me, yet say they are, and I told this person that I like to go with my instincts when shaping my perception of these people. To this person responded in a very hostile way. Well, maybe there are differing experiences of maleness outside of your understanding. To this, I don't remember what I said, but it definitely made me very angry. Weeks, months, or even years later, I realized I should have said in response that maybe there are just different experiences of femaleness to be considered. Why am I, the one born with a penis who still identifies as male, being told that I just don't understand being a dude by somebody with a vagina and estrogen? You see, I am a man, and I once was a boy. I sometimes played with girls and occasionally enjoyed dress up, but I mostly liked video games, action figures, and playing with toy swords. I sometimes refer to myself as a tomboy fag, but there was always something femme about me at the same time. My mother was telling my sisters that I was gay when I was about 3, and I got picked on for seeming gay as early as the 5th grade or so. Still, most of my friends were boys until I came out as gay in high school, and even in high school, I still had many straight male friends. Fast forward to age 34, having had many relationships with men, some of them being masculine and some of them being feminine, I have a very complicated and deep understanding of maleness. So when I see you so emotional in your videos, it is really hard for me to relate to that feeling. It does not strike me as similar or the same at all as the emotions of the men that I have known, including the trans men. I know now is where you'll likely just say I don't understand non-binary asexual people like you or something, instead of taking what I have to say to heart. But I am doing the best I can here, and I've literally known a legitimate asexual person, which is a statistical, mind-blowing rarity in terms of phenomenon. There's almost nobody who's actually asexual, but this person really was. This person was born with a hormonal disorder and I believe might have been intersex, I don't really remember, though they presented as male and they had a penis. However, they did not have enough testosterone to make them have a sex drive. They never had the ability to orgasm. He was a very nice guy, but he was a drug addict because, in his words, drugs are the only thing that gives me pleasure in the way people describe getting from sex. So think about this. Is that a life you want for yourself? Everything I have mentioned in this video, are these things that you legitimately can relate to? And do you want your life to be this way when you are in your 30s or 40s like the people I have described are now? Do you want to take all of the risks and burdens involved with being on hormones? Do you want to never have another orgasm or an orgasm at all? Are you prepared to almost certainly never have the opportunity to have children? Your life is just beginning. I know you said that you started making videos because you didn't have anybody to talk to about your gender identity and sexuality. I can understand that, and I do not doubt that something is going on with you and that you should really be talking to somebody about this. But broadcasting it on YouTube is not what I recommend at this point in your development, nor would I recommend simply going to LGBTQIA meetings at your school or whatever, because these meetings are usually monopolized by intersectional feminist ideologies, which I am not sure are helping you. What I really want is probably something that you have heard before, but I'll say it again, which is that I hope you can talk to a counselor. And since you are biologically female, you can probably very easily find free services through your student advisor. You won't even have to tell your parents about it. There is no shame in talking to a counselor or a therapist at all. And I think whatever is going on, this is going to be something that will help you in your life if you finally really do talk to a professional. You can talk about anything you want with these people. your gender identity, your sexuality or asexuality, whether you enjoy spending time with children and whether you would maybe want one someday, or even just everything that's happened on your YouTube channel. You can really talk to someone about that. Not just that, but they are legally obligated not to tell anybody else about what you said to them, as opposed to when you talk on YouTube, everybody just makes a copy of it and makes a response and it goes on forever. What if your words don't leave a specific room? Wouldn't that be nice? I've read an online article before that says YouTube can have a very positive therapeutic effect on young people, but I'm not sure how valid of an article it was scientifically. Still, I think YouTube can be great for people who don't have an outlet elsewhere. It definitely has been for me recently. However, YouTube therapy only works when the majority of people watching you end up agreeing with you. If you end up being attacked, and I legitimately feel very bad for you in regards to how much you have been attacked, then it clearly ends up making things very much worse. You see, when you broadcast your innermost emotional thoughts publicly to potentially the entire world, your thoughts are no longer something you own, really. Your own emotions become legally fair use. What I really want is for you to reclaim your own emotions and take those emotions and talk about them with a professional who is legally obligated not to tell anybody what you tell them. Thank you for your time, and I really wish you all the luck in the world.